So I've got two phones in front of me. You know what they are. This is the Galaxy S7 and this is the LG G5. One of these you can buy right now in stores. One of them, it comes out in a couple of weeks. Either way, these are the top two flagships from Samsung. Well, you could obviously throw the S7 Edge in there, but I just kind of couple that in here. So these are the top two flagships. They're out almost around the same time. They were unveiled on the same day. This is one of the first times we've seen these two companies really have a chance to go head to head. And so because of that, we can't help but do some sort of a comparison. So we're going to do that today. LG G5 versus S7, S7 versus G5. So when we're talking about these two phones, I think it's safe or easy to start with the specs, right? That's just one of those things we always sort of jump down. So if you look at those, they're actually pretty equal on paper. So the differences here are actually going to come down to design and experience and camera and things like that. But in terms of specs, you have Snapdragon 820 in each, which is Qualcomm's new processor. You have a little bit difference in display size and type, right? So on the S7, you do have a 5.1-inch Quad HD Super AMOLED display. On the G5, you have a Quad HD 5.3-inch LCD display. So two different types of display technology. I think it's safe to say that Samsung makes the best displays on the planet. LG's displays are never bad. They're actually quite good, but they're LCDs. They're just a little bit different. We don't mind them, but I would say, yeah, we probably tend to prefer what Samsung's doing with theirs. They each have 4 gig of RAM. They each have 32 gig of storage along with micro SD card slots. Samsung says their slot holds up to 200 gig cards. LG's kind of going crazy and saying they can support up to 2 terabyte cards, but those don't really exist. So they kind of are 32 gig with SD card slots. The S7 does come in a 64 gig model, but who knows where you're going to be able to buy that. You certainly can't do that in the US. The S7 actually has a 3000 milliamp hour battery. The G5 has a 2800 milliamp hour battery, but it is removable. So they're similar. G5 a little bit smaller, but you can remove it, swap a fresh one in, potentially add some sort of battery pack on later, things like that, because you can sort of slide it in and out. But Samsung did go slightly bigger. They both run Android 6.0.1 Marshmallow with Samsung's skin on top here and LG's skin on top here. Now, you know, everyone around Droid Life, we're not really fans of the skins from either of these companies. So I'm not going to say who I think has the better skin at the moment. They're both not great in my opinion, but they both can get the job done. And we'll talk some more differences there in a second. You know, we've got different color variations. We've got Wi-Fi and LTE. You know, all this stuff is very similar. But if we talk cameras for a second, so you have 5 megapixel front camera on the S7, 8 megapixel camera there on the G5. If we flip these over, there's a big difference there, right? So on the G5, you have that dual camera setup. So you have one 16 megapixel camera, and then you have a secondary 8 megapixel wide angle lens. So you have a dual camera setup. On the S7, you just have a single camera, which is 12 megapixels. So the difference is there really f1.7 here on the Galaxy S7, dual pixel technology, should be really fast, should take great low light photos. With the G5, it's similar, but it's just a higher resolution. It's not, you know, the fancy dual pixel technology. It's pretty much a standard 16 megapixel shooter, probably that they used in maybe even the V10 or even the G4. I would imagine it's a newer sensor, but you get the point. It's not trying to do anything completely different. The difference here is the fact that they added a secondary camera for wide angle shooting. So that's kind of differences there just on the surface. Now, the S7 also has water resistance, IP68 dust and water resistance. The G5, well, it doesn't really have anything. So the S7, you can take it into a bath. If it gets dirty, you can wash it off. It could be dropped in a pool, assuming it doesn't stay in there for too long. It can get wet. This phone can actually take some water. The G5, you're just not gonna really wanna go anywhere near the water with it. In terms of other differences, if we look at the bottom, this would be one. So the G5 is using a USB Type-C port. So that is going to be, well, we're assuming that's going to be the new standard for Android phones. The Samsung Galaxy S7 is still using a micro USB port. So we think Samsung did that because their Gear VR that's available uses micro USB, and so they probably didn't want to remake an entire fleet of Gear VRs. So that's sort of a difference there, but they both have bottom firing speakers. You do see a headphone jack though on the bottom of the Galaxy S phone. On the G5, it is up top. Speaking of up top, the G5 does have an IR blaster, whereas the Galaxy S7 does not. If we just talk design for a second, quite different, obviously. So with Samsung, you have the front and back glass along with the metal frame. You really kind of have that. I kind of always refer back to it as being sort of jewelry-like. You can see just with the way it reflects in light and things like that. Really, really well-designed phone. The regular S7 is quite small for today's standards of phones. It fits really nicely in hand. With the G5, you're looking at it has that 5.3-inch display, so it's not a large phone, but it is an all-metal design for the first time from LG. So you don't get the fingerprint magnet that you get with the S7, which I probably need to wipe again. But it's just a different look. Obviously, this is the pink one, and there's other colors that might suit you a little bit better. But it is just as premium as what Samsung is offering here. So it's just all metal, and then the front you sort of have that two-tone look with the colored chin. So. Both hands, though, I wouldn't say large by today's standards. S7 is obviously pretty small for today's standards, and the G5 is actually smaller than the G4 and some of those phones before it. So both fit really nicely in hand. Now the G5, again, it's all metal, but it is modular in the fact that you can slide out this bottom tray, swap batteries, add camera grips, DACs, things like that. So LG's really trying to push a little bit of innovation there by creating a modular style phone. With Samsung's phone, you obviously don't have that. I don't know that Samsung will ever do something like that. So that's sort of just your hardware differences. The other thing then would be, or the last thing I should say, would be the fingerprint readers. So LG's is on the back, Samsung's is on the front in the home button. For me personally, I'm a fan of the rear one, and that's partly because the Nexus 6P had it in that situation. The home button is fine. Obviously, Apple uses it. It's very successful. People like it. It's been on Samsung phones down here on the bottom for a while now as well. With LG's, though, you don't actually have to press in a button. So if you just rest your finger over that, it unlocks. With the Samsung phone, you do actually have to press the button to wake it and then use your finger to unlock it. So now you don't necessarily have to lift your finger off like I just did there. You can click it and leave your finger there and it should unlock. So it's not like it's a bad design or implementation. I just prefer the fact that I don't have to click a button. And so with LG's, I just pick up my phone and put my finger there and it unlocks. So another difference. If we start talking software, though, you'll notice as these phones are off, well, you can definitely tell in the S7 the always-on display. The LG G5 has it as well. It's just a little bit harder to pick up. You can sort of see it there. It's just a little more muted. So both companies introduced always-on displays this time around. Samsung's with the with the OLED panel is able to just light up specific pixels there. Shouldn't drain your battery. With the LCD on the G5, LG says they're just lighting up a specific segment of the panel. So where LCDs typically need to light up the whole panel in order to show any sort of pixel, they're saying they were able to do it just in this area up here. So again, it should conserve battery. I will say that LG's implementation is by far superior, in my opinion, to what Samsung's done. So Samsung's might be brighter and it does jump around so it doesn't burn in specific pixels, which is kind of cool, like a screensaver, and it shows date and time. You can customize it with calendar and things like that, and it has your battery percentage. The problem is it only shows notifications for Samsung stock apps, which is like the messaging application and the phone application, and it's actually kind of worthless outside of using just looking for the time and date. So I actually turned it off during my usage of it. I've just turned it back on for this video because I just found no use in it. With the LG phone, again, this is sort of tough to see, but it actually shows notifications from all of your apps. So I have a Hangouts message, and Inbox and Nest are all on there, along with the date and the time. So it actually shows me information that might help me decide if I need to pick up my phone or not. And actually, when a notification comes in, your phone will make a noise or vibrate or whatever, and the whole area lights up with a big icon for whatever the app is that came in. So if I were to get a Hangouts message, this whole thing just pops up in a little animation and becomes an Inbox icon. And so it it just makes a lot more sense than what Samsung's doing over there by not allowing third parties in. So let's dive in though, all the way here into the phone. So if we dive in software experience, I went with the same wallpaper just so you guys can kind of see what's going on here. Obviously LG has on-screen software navigation buttons, whereas Samsung has their capacitive buttons, which are on the wrong side if you ask me, and a physical home button. So it's the approach each of them has been doing for a long time now, so it shouldn't shock anyone. With Samsung, you do have your sort of typical home screen setup with an app drawer. With LG, we don't have an app drawer, so you just have pages and pages and pages of icons. Now, obviously, if you don't like either of these two approaches, this is Android, and you can install a third-party launcher, but this is the way they're presenting these phones to us, and so that's how we review them. I obviously am not a fan of a paginated approach to icons. It's just way too hard to find the apps you're looking for. It makes it so you have numerous home screens that I'd rather not have. I'd rather those be tucked away, but again, that's sort of a personal thing there. If we pull down notification shades, you can just see they actually look kind of similar. They're sort of a lighter gray skin. LG uses sort of a turquoisey green highlight, and Samsung has switched over to blue. If we jump into settings, I've actually flipped LG's to the list view, and Samsung's, on depending on where you're getting it, is in a list view or a paginated view. You can switch between them, but you can see how Samsung does things like it lets you pin your favorite settings up top, whereas LG isn't necessarily letting you do that. But they have settings for everything. It's kind of exhausting. If we jump into About here, you can see that they both are running Android 6.0.1, so they're both running that. One thing to keep in mind with these two phones in terms of software is LG has become actually quite good at updating phones, whereas Samsung is still about the worst in the business at this point. This phone is running 6.0.1 right now, but when Android N comes out this summer, we have no idea how long it's going to take Samsung to push that to this phone, whereas LG could do it within a couple of months, assuming they keep up with the current trend they're on. So software, it's sort of hard to show you some real huge differences there, but they skin things, and they have their own skinned dialer and messaging app and things like that. Obviously, this is Android, and we all install third-party apps, Gmail and Inbox and Hangouts and things like that, and those are all available. One thing to keep in mind is Samsung does have their theme store, and so you can actually install different themes and really change up the look. With LG, they don't necessarily have a theme store, but you can install third-party icon applications from Google Play, and you can actually then use those. So if I long press here and I go into home screen settings, you'll see in this theme section right here, there's LG, and then it actually lists one of the icon packs I have installed. So you can sort of do themes. It's just not an LG theme store like we have with Samsung and the Samsung theme store, but you can still sort of customize things there, which is nice. Lastly, let's just jump into the camera real quick. So a couple of things. Actually, let's go back all the way home so we can do this properly. So they each have camera shortcuts. Samsung's is a double press on the home button. LG's is a double press on volume down, and they both launch fairly quickly. Let me just grab something to sort of take a picture of here. So in terms of focus, the Galaxy S7 is probably the fastest thing I've ever seen on a smartphone in terms of focusing. With the G5, you do get quite a fast focus, quite a fast launch. And then you have the two cameras, so you can shoot wide-angle stuff, you can shoot normal stuff. Their camera UIs are somewhat similar. You have shutter buttons with video buttons above them. When you take a picture, you get a quick link to your gallery. We have manual controls. Just one takes 12 megapixel shots, one takes 16 and 8 megapixel shots. They have different modes and things like that, but their cameras are both really good, really fast. These two have sort of been leading the charge in Android for a while. With the LG, you do have a multi-point autofocus, although I believe Samsung has added that in now as well. You have laser autofocus over here, but Samsung is already boasting the fact that their autofocus is about the fastest thing on earth, and I would tend to agree with them on that. So that's just sort of a quick look at how the cameras just look in general. And that's pretty much it. In hand, side by side, you can just see, well, you can see the fingerprints here, but you can see that the G5 is actually quite a bit bigger. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but it is definitely bigger than the S7. It does have a slightly bigger display, but not enough to warrant this big of a size jump. So, you know, it's a little bit bulky, probably because it has a removable battery, and LG wasn't able to slim that down quite as much. It doesn't feel that big in hand though. The G5 feels nice, as does the S7. They're definitely different feeling though. This is glossy and smooth and reflective, and this is softer, matte, all metal. So they are different in hand. There's definitely some differences here. While they all have high-end specs, there are those differences, like I mentioned, water resistance on the S7. The S7 also has wireless charging and fast wireless charging, whereas the G5 does not have wireless charging at all. But the G5 does support Qualcomm Quick Charge 3.0 and that USB Type-C port, whereas the Galaxy S7, at least in the US, you're only getting Quick Charge 2.0, but then again, you do have the fast wireless charging. So differences, it's going to be a tough decision for a number of you. I know a lot of you aren't necessarily in love with the design of the G5, but trust me, in person, this area appears not as offensive as I think you all think by seeing pictures online. The Galaxy S7 is obviously a stunner. This is just one hell of a good looking device, assuming you can deal with all of those fingerprints. So this has just been a comparison of the two in sort of an overview style. If you guys have comments, questions, or want us to, really dive into a comparison deeper in any way, let us know.